Okay, thank you again for coming. Clearly there's the appetite and the positive desire for us to gather both in person and to continue on Zoom as well. So I feel very encouraged. You never quite know when you make a change, and we take the plunge and say, okay, now this is the time available, and we're going to meet, and we'll see how it goes. And you know, we felt enthusiastic, but you never quite know. So it's very encouraging to have so many people come together, online and in person, more than 50, which is wonderful to be able to practice together. I drove down this morning from Yokoji, from up in the mountains at the Zen Center, where the fall training period is nearing conclusion. Another 2 weeks, so we have another week of the regular training period practice, a lot of sitting, and then it finalizes with a 7-day retreat, which is similar, only more sitting for for the final week. And I see like Miyoshi here, who'll be joining us for that. So yeah, just building up towards a conclusion there. But of course, we go through these seasonal changes, sometimes more intense, sometimes a little more relaxed. It's very nice to come here this morning. It's just beautiful weather down here in the valley. Just he's very, very welcome. Just life is good down there. The weather's very good, and I thought I'd share a Zen koan this morning, just as a talking point, and then see where we go with this. And it's a case from the Book of Equanimity, which is my well-worn copy at this point of the Book of Equanimity, and it's a koan, so it's a Zen dialogue. And this koan has a short, more pithy version in the Book of Equanimity, and in the Book of the Blue Cliff Record, another Zen collection, is a lot longer, more dimension version in that book. And I'm going to bring this shorter version up this morning. I brought that up, that there's a longer version, because this koan's very dear to me. It's like very important. In koan study in the Zen tradition, it's exploring these inscrutable and seemingly contradictory abstract statements that are difficult to resolve, and working through those is part of the training in one path of the formal sense. It's not the only path, but koan is one route, and there's very many to study. There's just maybe 700 or something have to be resolved, and out of those there's always a few, and it varies for each person. There'll be a few very pivotal koans, and pivotal koans are usually points about Dharma practice which you were dark about, like they were really shadow, or were barriers, or something that was unseen, and then a certain koan will speak to that, and it's quite difficult to resolve because you don't understand, you can't see it, and then through leaning into that inquiry, something that was dark becomes more illumined, and there's a commensurate realization there. There's kind of a growth in terms of insight into one of the just many facets and dimensions of our complex lives, complex and very simple at the same time. And so this one is case 25 from the Book of Equanimity, a very classic Zen koan, and it's called Enkan's Rhinoceros Fan. And I'm going to read the preface and the main case. The preface is typically a pointer, like a few words that point to the main gist of what the main case will present. And there's a fair amount of poetic expression in here. Right? This is kind of either like late Tang, early Song Dynasty Chinese poetic style. So there's a lot of metaphor in this, typically, often used in aspects of a natural world. right? Which just really shows kind of Taoist, kind of Chinese Taoist roots, never far from the natural world. So here's a preface. Land and seas are boundless, yet they are not apart from right here. Things and previous ages, numerous as dust, all exist right now. As to when one is asked to show it face to face, being caught unprepared, one cannot present it. Tell me, where is the fault? Okay, so now the main case. Attention. One day, Enkin summoned his attendant and told him, "Go and bring me my rhinoceros horn fan. Right? My rhinoceros horn fan." The attendant replied, "The fan is broken." Enkin said, "If the fan is broken, then bring me back the rhinoceros." The attendant made no reply. Later, commenting on this case, Shifuku drew a circle and wrote the character for ox inside it. Okay, so I can tell from a few facial expressions on Zoom, particularly, that it says, okay, what's going on here? You know, there's maybe some obscure analogy, and there's a rhinoceros and an ox, and I'll do my best to break that down. Again, we're reaching into Tang Dynasty China, sometime, I don't do the math real quick, 1500 years ago or something, and yet a different cultural context, but still a very human life, human beings, you know, so much more in common than is different. Right? Like the same for us here, much more in common than there is different. Talking about an aspect of the principle of life, the principles of life, and understanding of the Dharma, understanding of the teachings, understanding of something of the mystery of being. You know, lots of words that we could use to try and translate what it is we do here. Right? We come into the room, whether online or inside, and the key foundational practice is always this still, quiet, sitting practice. Such a wonderful practice, age old. You know, no special equipment required. You don't have to invest in a lot of go out and buy a lot of equipment to meditate. You know, you just really need a chair, and most people have a chair, you know, or a cushion, and we have our body, mind, and then we come to a place of stillness and quiet. And right from the beginning there, we have everything that we need. We're fully empowered to resolve and dissolve the various barriers and distortions that are created in our conditioned worldview. Because as human beings, we're all, or I should say, I am conditioned. I'm conditioned by the environment and conditioned by people and things. From the moment I arrived in the world, that conditioning began with my family and my culture, or lack thereof, right? And that has always continued. And now, after 20 years at a Zen center, have I become unconditioned? No, I'm being conditioned on the drive down the hill, and conditioned on the way here, just over and over. There's no end to kind of relative conditioning, and yet there is also the unconditioned. There is the appearance and the realization of the unconditioned, and that is also this now. But that unconditionedness, this is where the real refuge and the freedom is, in this unconditioned now. It's not, the thinking mind does not grasp that. The thinking mind is grasping things, conceptualizing. right? Trying to understand and learn. A very effective tool, but a tool that human beings, for the most part, we rely on too much. Right? That kind of knowing intellect. It's a hammer and everything looks like a nail. And yet when we bring it to sitting practice, to Dharma practice, we very soon realize that there is something in this mystery of life that cannot be thought through, cannot be understood or grasped, something that is beyond being defined and fixed. So we're both conditioned and unconditioned, both constructed and unconstructed. And our meditation time is the time to be unconstructed and unconditioned. This is why I was, at the beginning, remind over and over again, and I'm speaking to myself, reminding myself, for this, I like reminding myself and reminding myself in both directions at once to let go of the thinking and the weighing and the judging and the picking and the choosing and the preferring and the pondering. To let that be put aside for a period of time. Because as we do that and we invest our time and energy in being unconditioned and unconstructed, and something really wonderful takes place. The body-mind returns to its natural, peaceful state. And if that natural, peaceful state can be recognized in the conscious mind, then that is what we call in Buddhism or Zen samadhi, which is a kind of a peaceful concentration. And we can notice that when we sit for 30 minutes, and then the bell struck for us to move for a few minutes, there's a qualitative shift in attitude and experience of mind. Things naturally have become more still, present, and open. So to do so is very nourishing for the body-mind. I don't know anyone who sat meditation or did a retreat who after, it's difficult. It can be difficult to do so, but afterwards, you rarely hear somebody say, "Well, that meditation really messed me up." I feel right. It's typically not that way. It's like when we sit, the body and mind will naturally begin to settle. It isn't something that we need to direct. It isn't something that we need to manipulate. In fact, the surest way to sit and meditate is to cease manipulation of one's experience. This is that essential then for, with thought, don't call it good, don't call it bad. Right? Busyness of the mind, don't call it good or bad. Just allow yourself as you are. Allow the world as it is. From that place, really, then we can sit all of the way down. So in our koan here, there's the Zen teacher Enkan, and he has an attendant. That's a tradition that we still continue in the Zen tradition. It's something of it's real apprenticeship model where you study with a teacher day in and day out for a number of years. Right? That's a model which takes place in many different theatres of life, many different roles. You study with somebody who's spent a long time and has gained at least some facility, become somewhat adept. Right? I'm not sure about the title Zen Master. I've never met one. Mm-hmm. But at least a devoted practitioner. That's mastery enough to be a devoted practitioner. So you have somebody who's studying with such a person, and he's an attendant, taking care, it's kind of attention-based practice, looking after this person. And often the teachers of this era particularly were quite elderly, were often very elderly, and, needed a little help, and would have a young monk or a young nun to kind of help them with things. And you imagine perhaps this is a hot day, right, in this era. I don't think they had swamp coolers in the Tang Dynasty, right? So he needs his fan, and says, "Bring me the rhinoceros horn fan." That's, it's interesting when you hear like a rhinoceros horn fan. I mean, those are like, They could be like, hold on, Enkan, I think you could get 10 years in prison for having a rhinoceros horn fan. I don't think we're dealing in those, you know. But they were rare even in that era. Not for the reason that rhinoceros had been, you know, hunted and poached to the point of extinction, but if you want to go get that horn from a rhino, how are you going to do it? You know, in those days, those creatures were pretty much, they couldn't be defeated. Right? So finding a horn would probably be from a naturally deceased one, so they were extremely rare for a different reason, hard to procure. So you can imagine this teacher do you have anybody have a special object at home, a particular, something very dear to you, you know, maybe it was given to you by a loved one, or something that you achieved, that it was a recognition. We all, as human beings, we have special things, right? Maybe it's something on the bookcase or on the wall, a painting, a piece of art, and it could be many different things. Maybe a drawing from one of my children from many years ago. You know, I have this case somewhere that it just has all my son's art from middle school in it, you know. And I think someday I got to go through that. And, you know, if I brought a discerning eye to it, I'd be like, well, maybe that one can go. That's not the best one. But I could never bring myself to throw any of it out, actually. Right? So we have as human beings, we have these special things. But the fan in this case is also a very practical instrument. Like if it's a hot day, to be able to fan oneself is important. Right? And many of the things that objects that we have also serve a good functional or practical purpose too. Maybe you have a favorite pen, or you know, or any kind of article, something, maybe your car, something that we really enjoy and also has a function, has a purpose. So he calls for his rhinoceros horn fan, and the attendant brings the bad news. The fan is broken. The fan is broken, he says. So this can be somewhat of a deceptively simple point. You know, if a person wants their fan, it's a hot day, the fan is broken. Maybe we'll be thinking, well, who broke it? Did you break it? You know, like, who broke my fan? It could reveal a lot about the teacher's attachment to the object. You know, there's a story of Ikkyu, a famous, very precocious Zen teacher in the later Middle Ages. It said when he was a child, he was an attendant to a teacher, and he broke his teacup. And it's like the teacher's favorite teacup. And this was like, he thought he would get a beating for that, you know. This is in Japan. And so when he saw his teacher, he said, he brought up a talk the teacher had gave on the fact of impermanence. And he says, isn't it so that all things, no matter how prized, will eventually, everything will decay? He said, yes, that's the truth. And then he says, I broke your teacup. And avoided a beating, like in saying that. Right? So the fan is broken. But it's also, this now points at something a very deep aspect of our life. As human beings, we have attachments. I have attachments. Do you have attachments? Anyone not have any attachments? Anyone on Zoom with no attachments? Right? I mean, we all have attachments. The Buddha pointed out how we, as human beings, we are immersed in attachment and aversion. Right? That simple formula that says, the great truth that says, we want the things we like, we don't want the things we don't like. And the world proves to be uncooperative in that. Have we noticed anything lately that may have happened in the world which we may not have wanted? That someone may not have wanted? Did it all go to plan for everybody, right? It's just like, if we're attached to something, then we're always running the risk of life taking that away, breaking that attachment, pressure in that attachment. And similarly, if we're averse to something, we don't want something to happen, we don't want this in our lives, then often again the world life is uncooperative. And we're confronted, so whether it's attachment or aversion as human beings, that is where a lot of the dissatisfaction, what the Buddha called dukkha, suffering, dissatisfactoriness, arises from this relationship to attachment and aversion. And this is very much the human condition. The fan is broken. The world is broken. The country is broken. This one here is broken. In one sense, in a relative sense. Right? We don't have to look far to find the flaws and the cracks and the downright brokenness. And so anything that we're, when we're attached to the world, which we always hopelessly are, even let them all go now and then we pick a few more up on the way to the car later. Right? We're always picking up these attachments. And yet things keep breaking. Relationships, friendships, careers, health. A great and difficult truth of living in this world, of living in this realm as this. The fan it's broken. The fan is broken. Things are broken. But again, this is the conditioned life, the world of preference, preferring something, desiring something. Right? That's always involved in something conditioned, and so we always run the risk of being hurt by that. I think everybody's familiar with this, right? So the fan is broken. But Enkin doesn't leave it there with his rhinoceros horn fan. He says, then bring me back the rhinoceros. It's a curious statement. Now in Zen, particularly, I think maybe other areas of Buddhism too, a rhino, or it also comes up as an ox here in a few more lines, is pointing to something else, is pointing to our immutable, unconstructed, constant, original, true nature, this nature of self, this present experience now. Now this present experience, this now, this nowness, which you can't put a pin in. I never found, in these years of practice, I've never found anything called the present, or found anything called the moment, or found anything called the past, or the future. All these labels can be useful in helping us navigate this experience, but if you look cleanly at it, it's always this way. Fundamentally, it's this way. Like the way that it is now. Always. And it always has been. Since consciousness first arose as our life. It's always been something constant. This awareness that we are. I say the awareness that we are, not the awareness that we have. Sometimes we talk about it, but that's to talk about it in conditional terms. I have awareness, or bring awareness to something. There is a persistent awareness, which is always aware, whether you or I are aware or not. That awareness is bright and aware and clear at 2 o'clock in the morning as it is in 2 o'clock in the afternoon, whether we are aware or not. This fundamental being and awareness that we call life. And that is an extraordinary mystery, which nobody has solved. Why it is so. But it is undoubtedly so. because it is now. It is this now. This is what perhaps you could call bring me back, bring me back the rhinoceros. If your nature is flawed, if things are broken, then bring me back what isn't broken. Bring me back what has never been broken, never been flawed, never changed. Bring me that. That's our opportunity in meditation and Dharma practice, to know the truth of that. This still, quiet, profound awareness, which again isn't something that we own or have any possession of, but it's always so. It's always available. If we know that side, what we could call the self with a capital S, right? Because we have the self with a small s, me, I, and the world of things. Things are going well, things are not going so well. Things are going great. Oh no, now everything turned to crap. Right? That's the small self. We're all of us are navigating that each and every day. But this deeper nature of self, we could say with a capital S, this is the same awareness that you and I, that we all have in common. Everyone here, everyone on Zoom, and fundamentally everyone and everything in the whole world has the same root. Like why is this useful though? Bring back the rhinoceros. The woolly attendant made no reply when he said this. Now, often in particularly in Zen practice, making no reply is often a good, safe response. Is it the quiet stillness of confidence and serenity, or is it the quiet stillness of I have no idea what you're talking about? Let's just keep a neutral expression on yourself. On your face. It's like you see images of a Buddha, like the one I have behind me now, sits there serenely with well, who knows what he's thinking, right? Like it could all be hidden behind the smile. I like to think not, though. I don't think so. But the attendant makes no reply and just remains silent. Traditionally, this response can be taken in a couple of different ways. Perhaps he's just flabbergasted. Bring me back the rhino. How the hell do I do that? I mean, it's impossible. Wait, drag a rhino in here? First, you got to catch one. That's a project. Bring me back the rhinoceros. So it could be flabbergasted or sees it in that way. Could also just be, here it is. Here it is. Tough to say. Just remains silent. And later, commenting on this case, I always enjoy this because in the Zen koans, often the later commenting on this case is often fast forward 700 years, somebody decided, I can add something to this. Often the comments come hundreds of years later. Which I really love, something about like the tradition of Dharma, like this in that sense, that it's something that's considered and carefully maintained over long period of time. And people only add something if they got something really good to add. And Shifiku, it says, drew a circle and inside wrote the character for ox. It could be rhino too. Maybe that's same thing, original nature. Drew a circle. And then wrote this character in the center. There was a teacher my teacher's teacher, Maizumi Roshi, one of his teachers, Yasutani Roshi, was giving a lecture, maybe in a room not dissimilar to this one, and it was to people who were kind of interested in Zen, but they were more kind of academic. It was at a college or a university. He was giving a talk on Zen and Buddhism. And somebody was asking him a question, and they had a whiteboard, and he said he got up and he said, here's what's going on. You think you're this, and he put like a dot on the board with a Sharpie. Said, that's you. He goes, actually, this is you. And he drew a big circle around it. And it said that that person had some insight at that. And just, okay, I understand something about what you're talking about. Here, Shifuku draws this big circle that includes everybody and everything. And then a little dot at the center. And in many ways, this is a beautiful illustration of for each one of us. You know, a vital dot at the center of a very large circle. And we live in both realms. The realm of sometimes feeling small, separate, disconnected, irrelevant. You know, a snowflake in a storm, right? It's just human being. One star in the Milky Way. Everything at scale just fades into that. In that infinite scale falls into the small. And yet in this great circle, you know, for any dot that's placed in there, there's no separation. Every one of us here, every one of us online, everyone and everything in every place right now is in its perfect place. It's the perfect time. Fundamentally or intrinsically. Now, relatively, the mind rushes in and just says, I'm not in the right place. And that guy's definitely not in the right place. She's not in the right place, etc. Right? But that's always the world of preference and conditioning and picking and choosing. So then, if we have a fundamental understanding that says, yeah, I understand, I realize that this world as is complete and perfect as it is. Beyond the relative conditions, but just the acceptance that this is the way things are. Not as a place to hide out or a place to spiritually bypass, but just the fundamental right view of a clear sight that this is, you know, go straight to the acceptance stage. This is it here. But not as a place to just then give up or show them the throat, as a friend of mine used to say. I had a friend, he went hiking around the Zen center and he didn't have a permit, you know, he's supposed to have a forestry pass or something, and he said he walked, a couple of times he'd encountered rangers on the trail, and I said, and what do you do? And he goes, oh, it's no problem, I just show them the throat. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, you know, just like, oh, I'm an idiot, you know, take mercy on me. And then they always just say, oh, okay, and they gotta let him go. It's like the passive approach. But it's not that, but it's like rather we're at this place of in acceptance and seeing things as they are. Now what do I do? What's next? What's the next step? What do I do now? Accepting and seeing it as it is. From an action point of here now, what's next? What do we do? Susan sent me a quote yesterday actually. Is a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, who, and I wasn't familiar with this quote, and I think it speaks to this point, and I'd like to share that. So Thich Nhat Hanh said, and I always say, like, I appreciate Thich Nhat Hanh very much. You know, I like to say that if we're still here in 100 years, people will certainly remember Thich Nhat Hanh. I think if we're here in 1,000 years, people will still quote him. That's a legacy that Lindor, because walking it like you talk it is important in the Dharma as it is in other realms of life. And he said, every bit of our understanding, compassion, and peace is useful. It is gold. There are many things we can do today to increase these capacities in ourselves. It is with this kind of peace and stability that you can serve. If you don't have the qualities of stability, freedom, and peace inside you, then no matter what you do, you cannot help the world. So there was a new quote for me when I read that. Every bit of understanding, compassion, and peace is gold. If you don't have the qualities of stability, freedom, and peace inside you, then no matter what you can do, you cannot help the world. This is reminds me of the more pithy and that old adage that says you need to put your own oxygen mask on before helping others on the plane. Right? As Dharma practitioners, that also rings true. Our practice to cultivate genuine awareness, genuine peace, genuine openness, that is the source of connection, empathy, deep listening, and understanding. And we don't have to wait for the world to create the circumstances that we desire. And it won't. But we are empowered to cultivate these qualities now. And can. That's what we do in our practice. We have an essential community here. The fact that 50 or so people can join together in an activity which is genuinely and deeply helpful to each other and to those in our spheres of activity. If we practice peace, awareness, presence, all these words that we can put in, you know what I'm talking about, right? If we cultivate that, then that is what is transmitted in the places where we have real power and real reach in our everyday lives, family, friends, colleagues. And to do so then offers something to the world, offers something useful. As Thich Nhat Hanh mentions there, you become a person of service, to serve the world, to serve those around you. So we always have this possibility of acceptance, of seeing things as they are, allowing things to be as they are. Which sounds easy, but it's not. And our sitting practice is really the great engine room, of a great bedrock of that practice. If we spend time in sitting meditation, where we can truly ground ourselves, ground the body, ground the mind, you gain power from the world. I mean that, to sit down on the earth, to sit on the ground, to sit on a chair, to fully sit down don't underestimate the power of that. We connect and tap into the great source of experience of the world. And if we allow that to come into realization, then we're an instrument of the world. And if we're awake and aligned with the world will use us for appropriate action. And that's more reliable than our conditioned ideas around it. Although ultimately, we can work and serve in both realms, an absolute sense and a relative sense. Why not? Bringing those two things together, when our relative function and our relative understanding is underpinned and supported by an absolute understanding, then we're really in alignment, then we're really integrated. But that practice, that's an endless practice. That's an endless practice of refinement. Okay. I'd like to open it up for any question, any comment from both in the room on Zoom. If we have a question or a comment in the room, I'll try and sort of repeat it back so those in Zoom can hear it too. So knowing how my brain functions, that's me saying keep it on the shorter side, or I'll forget. Anything anyone would like to raise up, either here or on Zoom? I hope this koan is interesting to you. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Time flies, huh? Just kind of rabbiting away out there. I look and it's past noon already. But do we have are there any further announcements or anything that we would like to bring up before we close? Who's next week? I should give a plug for who's next week. I don't know who's next week. And look, no, none of us know who's next week. Somebody wonderful. I could look. I have it right here. Next week is gosh, November's running away. It's 10th today. Ian Chalice will be here next week. So thank you, everyone. Again, I put the kind of the Dharma link in the chat as we do. So please think about that in terms of continuing to support the organisation. Good to see your faces online. Thank you, everyone on Zoom. Thank you, everyone.